Okay guys, so welcome. Let's talk a little bit about analyzing your reference. Okay, so you guys have got the basic idea of analyzing poses by now. You should understand the difference between keys, extremes, and breakdowns. Okay, I'm just going to try and reinforce that here. I'm on this demo right here. It's a recorded demo where I've analyzed a piece of reference. So you're going to see I'm just going to kind of play it, and it's sped up so I can just kind of quickly talk about what's going on and some of my thought process. Okay, if you guys haven't watched the grease pencil tutorial, take a look at that. That's what I'm using inside of Maya to analyze my video on an image plane. Okay, so I'm just going to hit play, and you're going to see that I'm going to define my key storytelling poses. I'm going to look for contacts and passing poses, anticipations, overshoots, squashes. All that stuff are considered keys because they create basically either the story or the extreme positions of the movement. Okay, so my first pass, you're going to see that what I'm doing is I'm just marking up and figuring out what are my key poses. Okay, and you'll see I'm just circling an X, and that to me signifies it's a key pose. I'm going to ask you guys to kind of use the same marking system you're seeing here. So your key poses will be a circle with an X in it. Your extremes will be, as you can see, an underlined X circled. Okay, so try and make a distinguishing kind of visual for yourself and for me so that I can see that you're thinking about what your keys are and what your extremes are. Okay, now if you're wondering the difference, well, keys are key storytelling poses, and other poses like contact poses and passing poses that we've already established. Main anticipations can be key poses, but there is sometimes a blurry line, and sometimes what I consider a key you might consider extreme, and vice versa. Don't get too worried about that. The idea behind this is to try and make a workflow that makes sense to you, because you would basically build your keys first, then you would build your extremes. So it's kind of like working from the big idea to the smaller idea, down to the breakdowns, down to the in-betweens, right? Okay, it's a workflow process, pose to pose. So don't get too hung up. And you can even see my first pass, I labeled everything a key, and then I went in and decided, okay, you're more of an extreme. The down pose was more of an extreme, and the up, or the second anticipation, or the first anticipation, I should say, was an extreme. Okay. If you're wondering why the color coding, red signifies a key in Maya, and also as far as circling the X, we used to circle keys in 2D, at least a number on the paper we were drawing it at. Okay, so that would signify a key would be a circled number on top of a numbered drawing. Okay. And that would signify a key. So I'm going to ask you guys to circle an X in red, and that will signify your keys. Write, yourself little messages on the right too, because that's going to help you. The next process after you've established that, and we'll take a little bit closer look at this after I let it run through, then after you've established what your main keys and extremes are for your block out, you're then going to turn around and look at the specific poses, because you need now to think about how you're going to build these poses and what's going on. Okay, so you're going to see me trying to push all that stuff we've been talking about already, the line of action, the mechanics and contrapposto, so thinking about everything as far as rotate X, rotate Z, rotate Y, and how that's all working, and the line of action that's being developed, the forces. You can see me creating arrows to try and tell that story. I'm exaggerating poses too, you can see at times, and pushing them, because animation's all about exaggeration. Okay, so after that plays out, I'm just going to take a quicker look and just point out why these are, some of these keys are what they are, and some of them aren't. Okay, so here is just the play blast of that analyzed piece of reference, looking at the keys and extremes. Okay, so obviously this is beginner level, so I have a starting pose and an end pose. Those are going to be obviously key poses. There's no argument there. Now he needs to take a step so you guys can fall right back on what you know about a walk. A passing pose is a key. A contact is a key, so you obviously need to find something that represents your passing and your contact pose. A main anticipation, in this case, I've labeled it an extreme. You can go either way. It's an extreme position. You go way down in order to pick up your leg, in this case. Or a main anticipation can be considered a key moment. Okay, I tend to, depending on what mood I'm in, sometimes it gets labeled a key, sometimes it gets labeled an extreme. But either way, they're both extreme poses, a key or an extreme. So don't get too worried about stuff like that. Okay, your character though needs to anticipate out of his first pose in order to pick up his leg. And since he's required to be standing on the leg he's picking up, guess what? Everybody's going to have an anticipation where the weight shifts down and over off of the leg in order to prepare to pick up the leg, okay, into the passing pose. Contact, you see me really stretching and really exaggerating and kind of saying that's going to be a straight leg, a stretch in. There's going to be a squash afterwards. That would be an extreme, right? Your body weight comes down and brings you farther down than you're going to be at any point. So find your squash, and that's going to bring you down farthest into an extreme pose. Then I thought I would kind of exaggerate what I'm seeing here and say then I'm going to overshoot, come up higher, and then settle down into my forward pose a little bit more, okay? Even though I'm a little, as you can see, scrubbing through here, I get a little wavy. I'm just going to simplify that idea and say I'm going to come up and then settle down and slow in into my final pose. So again, since I've come up higher, then I'm going to end up. That's an extreme pose, so I would build that in my second pass too. Farthest down, farthest up, settling into my key storytelling pose, right? So extremes, guys, positions of farthest movement, right? Storytelling poses, contacts, and passing poses, all keys, right? Let's move on to the breakdown pass, okay? So the breakdown, you're going to see we're using the color green, okay? Green signifies breakdowns in Maya, if you didn't know that. Also, a sort of underline number on a 2D page. If we actually were labeling something a breakdown in 2D days on a piece of paper, we would write the number and then put a slash under it, underline it, and that would represent a breakdown. So that's why I'm asking you guys to do that. Okay. So breakdown's a little bit more complicated and maybe, you know, maybe subtle sometimes and very easy to overlook. The bigger your action is, the faster you're moving, the more you're going to see a lot going on in your breakdowns, okay? If they're more subtle, you're probably going to have very subtle breakdowns that, you know, you want to exaggerate anyhow because that is one of the principles. And so the main things I think about when I'm thinking about what goes on with a breakdown is they help support the arc of the movement, okay? And they also help to offset the movement so everything doesn't move together, and I'll try and kind of show you what I'm thinking about in mine in a sec. And they also help to create changes in the speed. They can favor your poses and favor your timing. They can help slow in to stuff, and they also help you pause and hold, okay? So all those are considered basically breakdowns. Well, you kind of saw the process. It's more really of the same. I'm obviously looking between my keys and extremes, okay? So I'm just going to even bring up that video and scrub through it so we can take a closer look of what I'm pointing out as far as what's going on in those breakdowns, okay? So I'm going to stop this again, and I will just scrub through this and say, you can see me finding a breakdown between my first anticipation up. I don't know if I pointed that out before, but I did find an anticipation up as an extreme of my character coming slightly up before he comes down too, okay? And from here, if my character rocks slightly up and slows out into my first anticipation, then on the way down into the down pose, I'm going to look to control him with a breakdown and not let Maya do that work for me, okay? And you're going to see my notes are kind of pointing to the idea of like, hey, let's leave the upper body back a little bit longer, okay? I've heard it described this way as something leads and something follows. In this case, the hips are kind of leading, and the upper body and the hands are following. They're all kind of secondary, okay? Secondary action is another principle you want to look for the driving force, which is the actual movement of your character, not the secondary force. Don't get caught up too much with your arms at times. Get caught up in how you're moving your body, okay? So I know my hips are coming down. They're going to be driving down, coming down faster. And that says, well, let's exaggerate and leave my upper body and even my arms up a little bit longer. Then they can come down later on the way down when I come down, okay, and rock back. Also, look at me. I'm thinking about the arc. That's this big swoop here next to the headline. You can see it there. That's me arcing, and watch my head. You can even see my head arc down and then up and back, okay? So I'm going to look to try and strengthen that with my breakdown as I build it, okay? I'm still kind of in a backward C, as I've kind of indicated with the arrows here, because my upper body is going to hold back a little bit longer and then come down more into a forward C into here. Here's another breakdown I'm looking to put in, which is coming out of my down pose and my anticipation and coming into my passing pose. How do I get from there to there? Well, I'm pretty stiff, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, you can very easily overlook this, but when I'm building this, I'm going to say, no, I don't want this all moving too stiffly, okay? I'm going to actually keep my body moving in that direction and pushing in that direction, but I'm going to hold my head and my arms dragging back a little bit more, and even hold myself more in a forward C before I come up and maybe open up a little bit more. And you can even see here into what I created as an up pose as my next breakdown on the way to come to my contact pose. I'm like, let's hold me up and even open me up a little bit more, okay? Into more, it actually becomes a bit of an extreme, but I'm going to consider it a breakdown because I'm just going to call it an up pose, much like your walk, right? Passing pose, up pose, and contact. And you can see I'm exaggerating. I'm saying I'm going to have fun, pick up that hip instead of keeping it down. In this case, even on my passing pose, I decided to do that in order to have fun and exaggerate that, and then plop that and drag that, pull that hip down and that leg down into my contact. Next, you're going to see me think about how I come from my contact into my down pose, because I come down with a lot of force. So think of that too. The more force and speed you have, the more drag you'll have on your breakdowns. Again, I'm thinking about arcs. You can see the arc here. I'm thinking about holding back the upper body as the lower body squashes down first, and then the upper body comes down, okay? On the way up, I don't want it all to come up too soon. So you're going to see me once again think about the hips pushing up and then my upper body staying down a little bit lower and then coming up into the peak overshoot. And then you're going to see I'm going to need to slow in and have a moving hold to pause and stop at my final pose before we basically, cut, okay? And as you scrub through, well, as I scrub through, I should say, you can see me really thinking about a lot of force. There's posing and designing of poses and staging of poses, but it's moving now. And we're thinking about how things are moving in arcs. We're thinking about what's moving first, what's driving, what the force is creating. Like I said, what's leading and what's following is going to give you a lot of that. And look at your hips and your overall movement of your anticipations, okay? Another thing to point out, again, I kind of mentioned it a little bit, is like, don't get caught up in your hands. That's, in this case, secondary action, Especially, too, if you're holding your hips. You think, well, how am I going to let go of my hips? Well, don't worry about that. Figure out what you're doing. You have to shift your weight and pick up your legs. So figure that out. And then look at your hands and go, oh, as I, anticipate slightly out here, into a slight up pose, that's where I said, well, now I'm going to make a big decision to let go of my hips, to stage a little bit better and exaggerate a little bit better. And then even here, I'm going to keep them going out as I start to come down into my breakdown pose. And then they'll start dragging back the other way and then coming up, and then even dragging a little bit more out and then staying up a little bit longer and then coming down. I think of those after I get the rhythm of my torso kind of mapped out. Okay, so let's see. So just another quick look at another example of beginner level analysis. The one top left we just looked at, and the one on the right very similar. If I just kind of quickly, scrub through, I have an anticipation up again, a first anticipation before I come down into my main anticipation in order to pick up my foot. And then boom, 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 settle in and out, okay? So the same basic idea, big broad step backwards. Again, the hands are doing something really zippy and unique, but focus on taking the step. And then figure out the hands next. That's why analyzing is really good. And then I have that fun arc going on, and don't get too caught up in looking at the pretty little swinging arms. Look at the core movement, okay? Same basic idea though. Intermediate level, okay? Here's a neat thing. That is the grease pencil draw over without the image plane showing, and then I basically hit, I believe it's option B on my keyboard in Maya to turn the color of my background to black. You hit it until you find black, and then basically if you play blast it, you can basically have a really little rough animated thumbnail, which is kind of fun. You should be able to see the mechanics working and the overall action there if you've done your job analyzing, okay? Again, a little bit more work to be found here, but probably about twice as much work. You're going to be slowing in and holding, so you'll have breakdowns in there, like I pointed out. Even if your character stops and cuts, you're still going to have a slow in at the end and a little bit of a moving hold to hold it for a little while, and then we're going to cut out. So you're still going to find a lot of the same things. You're going to find your main anticipations. You're going to find breakdowns on the way up. You're going to find contacts, down, settle, up, anticipate, rock back. Here's a double bounce to come back. So you can see my body comes down, up, down, up. So again, if I'm looking for extremes, it would be an extreme anticipation down, a peak overshoot up, or an anticipate up, before I squash down and anticipate again, before I maybe peak up again and contact and squash. So a little more complicated to take that step because I bounce back. I anticipate up in a bounce, and then I basically bounce again to anticipate. Okay. So let's see. Advanced, obviously, even more complicated because you have to keep going through this. But once you've done it once, you should know what to look for. You're going to be looking for the same things over and over again. So don't, even here you can see I start off with my hand on my head here. Here though, you can see I really kind of like let go and turn my head as I'm coming down. So again, this is where it gets complicated. Again, try and ignore this part. Find the down first. That's your main anticipation, to come down, and then take your step into your passing pose, and then contact, and then down and settle again. Okay. Then go back and try and figure out how you're going to build and when you let go and what that's all doing. And again, I'd think about this is all set to, it's an anticipation, so it's an extreme. I'll probably build at some point after I have my main anticipation down here. So maybe the main key is to let go, and you can see that's me saying body comes slightly up while where my hand lets go of my jaw. So I thought I might say, hey, let's go up, and even though it looks like I'm coming down, I'm going to say I'll do something and exaggerate it and do something opposite, where I'll pull my head back, pull my upper body up a little bit more, and drop my hand a little bit in anticipation, then to come down into my main anticipation and take my step, slow in and hold before I basically take my next step. Okay, guys? So hopefully that has helped you out a bit, and I will see you next time.